A big story we've been following here on Bridge City News is the Alberta beef processing plant CARGILL in High River being closed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Also in Brooks with JBS Foods, also dealing with the coronavirus. Now, one of the workers in CARGILL has died and hundreds of people have been impacted and infected by the virus. Brian Lilley joins me now. He's one of our regular contributors, joining me once again via Skype from Toronto. Brian, are we in danger of seeing an interruption to our food supply?
What I'm told is no. I mean, if you know the impact that the Alberta meat industry has on all of North America, not just Canada, you can't help but worry. The Cargill plant, it's massive, and been to High River many times. Beautiful town that's dealt with a lot over the years, and now they're dealing with this. But okay, if you're not in High River, what does it mean to the rest of us? Are we going to see a shortage of ground beef or steaks or you know, you know any sort of beef? And you've got to be concerned. What I'm being told is no, this will not impact the supply of beef in Canada. That what the Canadian beef producers have said is that they will cut back on exports before and most of our beef is exported. They will cut back on exports before they start cutting into what's available in the Canadian market. Obviously, Cargill's got to shut down. Harmony, up north of Airdrie, had to shut down a little while ago for this very same reason. Not as bad an outbreak, and now Brooks dealing with it. So three major plants. There's got to be a lot of back and forth. In Ontario, I believe it was Maple Leaf chicken plant that faced similar problems. There was Olymel, which is the biggest pork processor in Quebec, had the same issue. And you start adding these all up, Hal, and you say, are we going to have food on the shelves? Yes. Will it cost more? Possibly. And that's the downside at this point, because in addition to the shutdowns, the cleanings, all of these plants are having to work in different ways to meet social distancing requirements, to make sure that they stay clean, that they can stay open. So we may see higher prices, but we shouldn't at this point see shortages.
We may see higher prices and maybe more people becoming vegetarian too, kind of like my kids.
Won't be me. Won't be me.
We need our Alberta steak. There you go. Two airplanes that were sent to pick up personal protective equipment, Brian, for many of our frontline workers during the coronavirus pandemic came back empty. What happened there?
One of them was a plane that was chartered by the federal government, the other by a province. Now, when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asked about this, he confirmed all of the details to reporters in one of his daily updates, but he wouldn't identify the province. Now, I can assure you that it's not Alberta. That was my first thought because, as we've discussed previously, Alberta has one of the best supply chains for PPE in the country, as I believe the sole province that buys all of their equipment through one buying channel. They've got better options. So much like the Ontario liquor store, if they want that particular French wine, they're going to get it. Well, for us, it's booze. For you, it's PPE, which is a bit more valuable at the moment. So it wasn't Alberta's. I haven't been able to confirm that it's Ontario. Some confusion there. People saying, no, I don't think it's ours. So my guess at this point, we'll find out shortly, I'm sure, is that it's most likely Quebec. All the provinces working to get their own PPE, but also working in conjunction with the federal government. And what happened was the two planes were forced to leave because the material wasn't there. And there are rules in China about how long you can sit on the tarmac. So Chinese officials said, nope, you've got to leave. So they had to fly all the way back to Canada without the material. That's a real problem. I will say this, Hal, I'm a critic of the federal government at times, but their move to set up a warehouse in China and strengthen supply chains for all the provinces and for the federal governments is a very good move. Before this, what was happening was we'd have planes waiting to take off and people would show up with suitcases full of cash and buy all of the equipment that was supposed to be loaded onto our planes. Now they're trying to warehouse it so that it's there and we don't end up with situations like this. But obviously something hinky happened again.
Don't you think there's a little bit of irony as well? Many people argue that the coronavirus came from China, and now we're setting up warehouses and we want these PPEs to come from China?
Well, and at times we're getting bad PPE from China. This is something that the city of Toronto has dealt with. There was a large health agency. The location escapes me. It just went out of my head. This was supposed to be their backup stock, and it's gone now. 3M, by the way, has launched a lawsuit in Ontario court against a couple of Canadians who were claiming an association with 3M. 3M has been going around. They've launched lawsuits in California, in Texas, I believe Delaware, Illinois, and now in Ontario, trying to get at people who were price gouging. They were charging up to $17 for a single mask that they claimed was N95, and 3M doesn't even know if they were actually their own masks. That's all part of the lawsuit now.
Brian, BC has been talking about opening up their economy again, and Ontario is starting to make plans as well. Are we slowly headed in the right direction?
Well, that again depends on where you live. And right now in Alberta, the answer is a definite no. British Columbia was ahead of the curve on this in terms of having the pandemic hit them. They got hit earlier than the rest of the country. They got hit harder, and now they're coming out of it. In Quebec, it's unlikely that they're going to open up. And in Ontario, we're still about 500 new cases a day, dozens of deaths reported each and every day. That is not happening yet. But the province here is starting to talk about it. Much like Premier Kenney has said, this is a goal of his. Now, he hasn't released his plan yet, but he has said it's important that we be ready to reopen. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has set up a provincial cabinet committee to look into these very things. All the economic ministers from finance, treasury board, job creation, tourism, and the arts and culture, all of them on this committee to say, okay, once we're ready to go, how do we do it? Like I said, British Columbia is a little bit further ahead. Now, I did a big piece on this on the weekend, talking to all kinds of people. The owner of Lawn & McQuaid, they've got stores across Alberta, in British Columbia, every province. They are looking at how they're going to be doing it. Businesses are looking at how they're going to be doing it. And the term that I heard from business people was it's going to be a dimmer switch, not an on-off switch. So the lights are off right now. They're going to go up. It's going to start off kind of romantic, Hal, before it gets really bright. Think of it that way. It won't be back to business as usual right away for the business community. How we work will change and will continue to be changed for a long time. How we shop will continue to be changed. Whether we can go into restaurants, all of those things.
And polling shows that regardless of how provinces are doing, Brian, the public wants the restrictions we're all living with to stay in place for a little while longer.
Yeah, and again, that was across the country. It was regardless of gender, regardless of social and economic class. It was regardless of political party. So 77% across the country said no. The low was Quebec at, I believe, about 64%. Alberta was 69%. And Ontario, 84% saying it's too soon to release the restrictions. 64% of Conservatives said it's too soon. Among Liberals, it was 89%. New Democrats, 88%. So people are just, no, don't do it yet. Now imagine that you're a premier and they're all facing this same pressure from certain groups to say, open up. And you look at the general public and you say, they're not there yet. And then on the other side, you've got the medical officers saying, you're not ready to open yet. This is dangerous. So the public doesn't want it. And the medical officers say, it's too dangerous to do it. If you do open up, you're going against public opinion, very strong public opinion, and you're going against the medical experts. Every single death that occurs after that will be blamed on the premier that opens up before things are ready.
Brian, I've talked to a lot of business owners across southwestern Alberta. Many of them are saying, I can't afford to keep my doors closed another 2 to 3 months. What are you hearing as well with the business owners that you've interviewed?
Well, they're understanding, but they're saying, look, we've got to find a way to do it. And so depending on where you live, provincial and municipal regulations vary. And you've seen things like allowing restaurants to do more takeout, or if you're a licensed restaurant that can serve beer or wine, well, you can sell the beer or wine with the takeout food, or Canadian Tire can do curbside pickup, and so can the pet food store. There are ways to get around this. Lawn & McQuaid is doing curbside business still. So if you really need that guitar for, to torture your wife in the middle of lockdown, Hal, you can go to Lawn & McQuaid and get that guitar. And other stores are doing it. But they've got to see a path that makes sense to them. And many of them are coming up with their own plans and lobbying government. Golf, for example, big golf lobby, hitting every provincial government saying, you know what, we can change the rules. We can make sure the clubhouse is closed, the pro shop is closed. We can adjust tee-off time so there's longer space. You don't have foursomes, all kinds of things like that. those are the types of things that we will start to see as we reopen. It's not going to just be, all right, we're back open and it's business as usual. It will be gradual, it will be slow, but we'll get there.
As we discuss opening up some aspects of the economy, Air Canada is stopping all flights to the United States for a month beginning on April 26th. Tell me more about that.
The business case just isn't there. If you remember back to the beginning of all this, the end of January, Air Canada was still doing a lot of flights in and out of China. And there were calls for people to say, oh, wait a minute, we've got to stop flights in and out of China. It's dangerous. Well, before Air Canada could be told to stop going in and out of China, before governments could shut down the border, the business just dried up because people said, I'm not going there. I'm not going to Wuhan. The Chinese government had put in travel restrictions. We had not, but people just said, I'm not going into this hotspot. And so a whole bunch of the airlines dropped their business. So Air Canada saying, you know what, the border's going to be closed for another 30 days. There's no sense doing these flights back and forth. It doesn't make economic sense. You've heard the stories of WestJet based in Calgary. So much of their fleet is just sitting idle. Air Canada is doing much of the same. This is why we do need to get the economy going again. For all of these jobs, people will say, well, who cares about big business? Who cares about the stock market? It's about the flight attendant. It's about the caterer. It's about the pilot. It's about the golf course marshal. It's everybody is out of work right now. And unless you're working for a very large company or the government, it's a lot of people not getting paid.
The fight over how to hold sittings of Parliament continues, with the Liberals blaming the Tories and vice versa. I know Conservative leader Andrew Scheer was talking about maybe 3 days a week, and Justin Trudeau saying, hey, that's simply irresponsible.
The Conservatives want 3 days of in-person sittings and 1 day of virtual sittings. Now, they're not having the entire 338 members of Parliament there. They're not having all the pages. You've spent time on Parliament Hill. You know that when it's in full swing, you're talking, not just the hundreds of MPs. They each have at least one staffer with them. If they're cabinet ministers, they have multiple staffers. You've got the clerk and the speaker and their staffs. You've got the pages. You've got the cleaning staff. You've got the security guards. We're talking thousands of people. That would be irresponsible. That's not what's happening. They're having above quorum. Quorum's just over 20 MPs. They're keeping the proportion to what the parties hold in Parliament. So it's a little over 30 MPs are showing up. The Conservatives say 3 in person, 1 virtual. The Liberals say 3 virtual, 1 in person. Hey, split the difference. Have 2 and 2. Britain can hold their Parliament, but for as much as Justin Trudeau is standing out in front of his Rideau cottage every day and saying that the Conservatives are being irresponsible and they won't budge, guess what? He's not budging either. So, a pox on all their houses, find a solution, and get working. But if they don't come to an agreement, the House has to just keep sitting in person because that's what the rules are right now.
Former Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull has accused our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of humiliating other world leaders during negotiations for a revamped Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal in 2017. Brian, what happened?
Well, this is from Malcolm Turnbull's new memoir. And he mentions all kinds of world leaders in it, says different things about them. So every country is looking through the memoir to say, oh, what they say about our guy. And the headline in one of the stories was, Justin, we're not here to talk about your socks. And that came about because of this Trans-Pacific Partnership deal. That was a bizarre situation. There was a meeting in Vietnam, and the 11 countries that were going to be part of TPP were all supposed to be meeting to sign it. It was a done deal. The trade representatives had all signed off. They had arranged for all the leaders to get together. There were photographers and cameras there waiting to capture all this. And Justin Trudeau doesn't show up. Japan's Shinzo Abe comes in. He'd been meeting with Trudeau. He tells Turnbull and the rest, Canada's backing out. We're not going to do it. The next meeting that Turnbull had at this international conference was with Trudeau. Trudeau sat down and, according to Turnbull, said, what do you think of my socks? You've just annoyed 10 other world leaders, and we were all reporting on it at the time, and the Canadian government was saying, no, everyone's fine. We didn't annoy anyone. They did, and our prime minister asked, what do you think about my socks? At one point, the Japanese delegation, months later, put forward 2 press releases to the Canadian delegation at a different meeting and said, we don't really care anymore which news release we put out, but one of them is going out. Is Canada in or out? And one news release was for TPP 10, that would be the Trans-Pacific Partnership without Canada, or the other one was with Canada joining. Eventually, they got around to saying we would join, but we put a lot of our allies through bad times with that.
Wow. Toronto Sun journalist Brian Lilley, thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks so much for watching.